A member of the Armed Services Committee, Senator Tom Cotton, he organized an open letter to the leaders of Iran, signed by the 47 Republican senators. Tom, thank you so much for being with us. Not exactly sure where to start, so let's start with the Daily News. Your picture, very good picture of you, by the way, but they're calling you a traitor, saying that you've undercut the President of the United States, despite the fact they themselves are accusing the President of fecklessness in these negotiations. What do you say to these charges?
Well, Joe, I and 46 other senators are simply speaking for the American people. Your own network just released a poll that said 71% of Americans don't think a deal that the president is negotiating will stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. The point we're making to Iran's leaders, who, if you talk to many Iran experts, will say don't understand our Constitution, is that if Congress doesn't approve a deal, Congress won't accept a deal, now or in the future.
What about the president accusing you of taking up common cause with the hardliners in Iran?
Joe, there are nothing but hardliners in Tehran. They've been killing Americans for 35 years. They killed hundreds of troops in Iraq. Now they control 5 capitals in the Middle East. There are nothing but hardliners in Tehran, and if they do all those things without a nuclear weapon, imagine what they'll do with a nuclear weapon. That's why we're trying to stop them from getting a bomb.
Senator, if I could just ask you what you think of Vice President Biden's statement on this letter, in part where he says that this was expressly designed to undercut a sitting president in the midst of a sensitive international negotiation, and that it's beneath the dignity of an institution he reveres. I don't know about traitor, but aren't you guys tampering with an international negotiation? Isn't this undermining the president and the process? And wasn't that the point here?
No, we're making sure that Iran's leaders understand that if Congress doesn't approve a deal, Congress won't accept a deal, because we're committing to stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Joe Biden, as Barack Obama's own Secretary of Defense has said, has been wrong about nearly every major foreign policy and national security decision in the last 40 years. Moreover, if Joe Biden so respects the dignity of the institution of the Senate, he should be insisting that the president submit any deal to approval of the Senate, which is exactly what he did on numerous deals during his time in the Senate.
Do you really think it was appropriate to end run the president and the process and send a letter directly to Iran? Think about those words. Do you really think that was appropriate?
Yes, this is about stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And Iran's leaders need to understand that any deal that gives them a path to a bomb today, tomorrow, 10 years, 15 years from now will not be accepted by the United States Congress.
Senator, aren't we looking a little bit dysfunctional here when you are actually end running your own president and writing to Tehran? And isn't that perhaps destructive to the very point that you're trying to make? How do you actually have firm negotiations or anything else with another country if, quite frankly, both parties are coming at you?
Well, Iran's leaders have to understand that while the president negotiates agreements under our Constitution, Congress approves agreements. And if Congress doesn't approve agreement, then no future Congress nor future president is bound by that agreement, just as Barack Obama himself has repudiated agreements that were not approved in a formal fashion by the United States Congress.
And that's the point here as we go to Willie. That's the point here, is that if the president would do what Joe Biden, when he was in the Senate, demanded presidents do, and bring these sort of deals to the Senate for ratification, then actually they would be owned by the United States of America officially, instead of the president just saying, I'm going to do this and I'm not going to give the Senate any say in where this negotiation goes.
Senator Cotton, it's Willie Geist. I just had a question for you. It's clear you don't like the terms of the deal that's being debated right now between John Kerry and Iran. What would an acceptable deal look like to you?
Complete nuclear disarmament by Iran.
But they're not going to do that, right?
Just like Libya and South Africa completely disarmed when they wanted to rejoin the treaty, the world, in repudiating their own nuclear weapons program. Iran has a very clear and simple path. They can simply disarm their nuclear weapons program and allow complete intrusive inspections. As Prime Minister Netanyahu said last week, if they want to be treated like a normal nation, they should act like a normal nation, well, Senator, not the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism.
Senator, you and I both know Iran's not going to agree to that deal. So what's the next step? Would you be comfortable with a military confrontation with Iran?
Well, like a majority of Americans, I think we have to have a credible threat of military force on the table. But the real alternative, as Prime Minister Netanyahu said, to a bad deal is a better deal, with more sanctions, with confronting Iran, with only giving them the choice of the deal that would completely disarm their nuclear weapons program.
Senator Cotton, it's Catty Kay here from the BBC. Given that this is a two-way process, right, the negotiation, obviously the Iranians would have to sign up to, as well, negotiating whatever kind of deal you propose, and they probably aren't going to get involved in negotiations on anything other than what they're at the table for at the moment, which does lead us to the assumption that the alternative is military action, which actually only buys time as well, right? It has huge risks attached to it and doesn't wipe out Iran's nuclear program. It just buys us a few years.
Well, Israel struck Iraq's nuclear program in 1981, and they didn't reconstitute it. Israel struck Syria's nuclear reactor in 2007. They haven't yet reconstituted it. Rogue regimes have a way of getting the picture when there's a credible threat of military force on the table that we will not allow the world's worst regimes to get the world's worst weapons. That's why it's important that we have the credible threat of force on the table that would only enhance the ability to get a better deal that leads to Iran disarming its nuclear weapons program.
So Senator Cotton, would you support something that I talked about last week, which was actually allowing Iran to build nuclear power facilities like the UAE, but they're facilities that can't be weaponized? Would that be okay?
Well, Joe, that's a point that we've made in the Senate, is that Iran not only lacks the right to enrich uranium, Iran doesn't have a need to enrich uranium. There are other countries, you cite one, that have civilian nuclear power, and they import all their uranium under very tight controls. If Iran truly wanted nuclear power for civilian purposes, they wouldn't have to pursue the path they've gone down. The only reason they're doing so is they want to develop nuclear weapons capability with a very short breakout so they can have a nuclear umbrella to continue exporting terror all around the world.
So Tom, I think I'm probably in the minority. Well, I am. I'm in the minority at this table on this letter. I'm a bit split on it. And I'm not actually sure whether I would have signed the letter or not, whether Bob Corker may have a point. Bob, forget about the president, the vice president, forget about the Daily News. Bob Corker, obviously a very important voice in foreign affairs in your own Republican caucus, doesn't think this letter was a good idea because he thinks it might make this issue a partisan issue. Do you think you have just made Senator Corker's work all the more difficult in what he's trying to do to bring some accountability to this deal?
Bob and I agree, as does every Senate Republican and many Senate Democrats, on the ultimate goal, which is stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And we simply wanted to state clearly to Iran's leaders that if we don't approve a nuclear deal, then we won't accept it. And that Iran's leaders can only be certain that any deal will be lasting if Congress approves it. I welcome more Democrats and Republicans to join the letter. It's an open letter. They can join at any time.
Did Chairman Corker ask you not to do this? Or did he express to you any displeasure?
Joe, I don't want to get into my private conversations, but I can say that I talked with all Senate Republicans. We worked with many Senate Democrats. Many senators didn't sign for various reasons, but many senators agree with my views, even if they didn't sign the letter.
All right.
Well, there are some that have openly chosen not to sign, including Bob Corker. So I don't know what the private conversations were like, but they probably didn't go very well.
Well, you don't know, because you know what?
Because he's not telling us.
That's actually why they call them private conversation.
Well, he's publicly saying
Tom Cotton,
he will not sign the letter.
Thank you so much for being with us. We really do appreciate it this morning.
Nice to talk to you.
I would say keep up the good fight, but I'm afraid I would get a backhand
Don't say that.
from Mika. Keep up the good fight. Still ahead.